A rare sight on the French-German border. German police manning checkpoints. From now on, cross-border traffic will be at a near standstill. The borders to Denmark, Switzerland, Austria and Luxembourg will also be almost completely shut.
Für Reisende ohne triftigen Reisegrund gilt, dass
people without significant reason to travel will not be allowed to cross the border in either direction. And I urge citizens to cancel all non-essential travel across the border.
in diesen Bereichen unbedingt zu unterlassen.
Commuters will not be affected by the shutdown, and goods will still be able to cross the border unhindered. Anyone displaying symptoms of coronavirus infection will be handed over to the health authorities. There's no set time frame for these travel restrictions, and the government says it might extend them to borders with other neighbouring countries.
It's important that as few people as possible are infected, so we have to try to slow the rate of infection. There are really problematic areas in France, which is why we took this decision in order to slow the spread of the virus.
For now, the restrictions only apply on the ground. Air travel is not affected. German Chancellor Angela Merkel is meeting with her cabinet later to decide if the skies are to remain open.
Staying on the ground, and for more, let's bring in DW correspondent Bernd Riegert. He is standing by right on the French-German border between the French town of Forbach and the German city Saarbrücken. And Bernd, you are on the German side. Now, those new checks, they've just taken effect. Is traffic still rolling?
Well, you have to wait at least 30 minutes until you can enter from France to Germany. You have to get to this checkpoint, which you can see behind me here. The police is stopping every car now, checking if there are Germans in the car or other nationals. Germans can go on the right lane. They can enter Germany, of course. Others have to go to another checkpoint close to me here, where 20 policemen are asking people, what are you doing in Germany? What's the purpose of your visit? And only if you are a commuter, if you have your workplace in Germany, then you are allowed to enter. All others will have to turn around and go back to France. And also trucks can enter. Delivery of goods is not hampered by this effort today. So the border is not completely closed, but it's difficult to get into Germany right now.
Now, of course, we're used very much to open borders by now. How well prepared are police doing those checks?
Well, police is present here since midnight already. As I said, there are 20 people here on the ground. Of course, it's difficult to man this post. It's not only this one. There are many checkpoints along the French-German border. And a police officer told me it's very difficult to get all the personnel in place. And they don't know how long they have to undertake this effort, for days, weeks, or even months. Nobody knows so far. And there are no facilities, because this is a makeshift border crossing. This Autobahn has no border crossing installed, because the border was open for 25 years.
Now, it's all about curbing the spread of the coronavirus. What safety measures are taken in place?
Well, the police is working without any protective gear. Only if there's a suspicious case, if they see somebody sneezing, coughing in their cars, then they would protect themselves. They just keep a kind of distance. They don't touch people. But the police told me this is what all German citizens should do, and there's no need to have a mask. The fear that they might contract coronavirus here on the border is not very high among the police personnel.
All right, Bernd Riegert there reporting from the French-German border for us. Thank you so much. So that's the situation on the French-German border right now. For more on the political situation here in Germany, let's bring in our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner. Michaela, the response to this outbreak is snowballing here in Germany. We've seen sudden increases in restrictions in the capital, Berlin. Is the rest of Germany following suit with closures of bars, schools, other institutions and so forth?
Well, I wouldn't say that Berlin really is at the forefront of these closures. We are expecting today to hear from Bavaria, the state that directly borders Austria, where people are told to stay indoors already, that a state of emergency might be declared there. This against the backdrop that communal elections only took place on Sunday. So we are seeing very regional reactions, tough reactions as well. And we are yet to see a full nationwide lockdown, which also would be more in the sense of advice giving from Berlin, because after all, this is a federal state. But we have seen very tough action, as we heard from Bernd Riegert, already taken on the border to France, where people are being told by the Interior Ministry that declared these border checks only on Sunday evening, that they should carry documents that prove that they are indeed traveling back and forth from their job, or else, that's the big question mark. We'll learn that over the coming hours, whether people actually might be turned away simply because they can't prove that they are on a necessary trip.
Now, Michaela, we hear that the German army is also being drafted in to provide some kind of support. What exactly is their role?
Yes, they will provide logistical support. Also, the German army has several hospitals. So hospital staff from the German army might help out in other hospitals. Also, beds that would usually be reserved more for the national forces would be available for the public, more so than already in the past. So what we're seeing here is different agencies acting together.
All right, Michaela Küfner there. Thank you so much, Chief Political Editor, of course. Thank you. And now to other coronavirus hotspots around Europe, like Spain, France and Italy, which are among the worst affected by the outbreak. Now, Spain has followed Italy by imposing a lockdown, banning 47 million citizens from leaving their homes after the government declared a 2-week state of emergency. In Paris, dozens of people gathered outdoors on Sunday, despite the French government closing all non-essential businesses and urging citizens to limit interaction. Meanwhile, Italy remains on the front line of the virus in Europe. On Sunday, 368 new coronavirus-related deaths were reported there, the worst single-day toll for any country since the crisis began. And our correspondent Seema Gupta is standing by for us in Rome. Seema, Italian authorities have registered 20,000 violations against the lockdown in recent days. Are people there not taking the restrictions seriously?
Well, Monica, I think it's a question of also not understanding how they can and cannot apply those restrictions. To be fair, it's 20,000 violations in the space of about 4 days, and that is of a country of 60 million people that are currently in lockdown. To give you an idea of the kind of confusion, we're hearing the statements such as this gentleman that we have in sound.
I'd rather be punished than have my dog urinate in my apartment.
Well, such a gentleman, for instance, doesn't understand that, yes, you can bring your dog out of the apartment. You can bring it for a walk. Try to contain the amount of time that you go out and avoid other people. Now, that's what the officials are saying. Essentially, one can move out if they have a valid reason for work, for a health emergency, or for essential activity, such as walking one's dog, getting the groceries, going to the pharmacy, or even going to pick up the paper, because the newsstand is considered essential information, because the public needs to have access to information to understand what's going on in particular in the north of the country. The concern is that they have to try to limit the spread of the virus in that part of the country, but also the rest of the country. And hospitals, while the situation is dire up north, down south, they're also preparing for eventual more infections.
Well, you're talking about a very dire situation. We're seeing a high rate of deaths in Italy, especially compared to the situation in South Korea, for example. How do you explain that?
Well, first off, as the Prime Minister mentioned, when this lockdown was put in place for the entire country, the impact of the lockdown is only going to be felt in a couple of weeks. And we're still within that frame. The infections that one is seeing now, these high numbers, which are immense, are unfortunately a result of infections that took place before the lockdown. And on top of that, if one looks at the first original towns, those 11 towns that were originally put under quarantine, they've actually seen a slowdown in infection there. But unfortunately, the infections that we're seeing now is a result of before the lockdown. On top of that, the number of deaths. One has to remember that a quarter of the Italian population is over the age of 65. So it's one of the oldest populations in the world. As a result of this, unfortunately, the virus does tend to impact the more vulnerable of society. So those who are elderly or those that have underlying health conditions. So unfortunately, because of that, we're seeing these high numbers.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a bit about the psychological, the emotional stress of this situation, because we're hearing reports about people dying, not being able to say goodbye to their children, their loved ones because of the contact ban. What's that do to the Italian society?
Well, Italians, as we know, are tactile people. They're people who are used to contact. They have a strong sense of family as well, and contact with one's family. So yes, you're right. This is going to have a potentially negative impact in terms of the psychological damage, not just to the fact that children aren't able to meet their school friends or go to school and have a normal social life in that respect, but people understand that this is necessary in order to limit the spread. And that's why the use of technology has become so important. Video calls with friends, with family, even with psychologists online that are available, or taking to doing sport indoors and following yoga lessons online. These are some of the examples that people have turned to, and proving how technology is so important. On top of that, we've seen these flash mobs where people have come out onto their balconies, onto their outside of their windows in order to have a sense of solidarity as they deal with this epidemic.
Very, very important, some moral boost there. Correspondent Seema Gupta in Rome, thank you so much. 47 million Spaniards are now banned from leaving their homes for the next 2 weeks after the Prime Minister declared a state of emergency. More than 280 people have died in Spain, making it the second worst affected country in Europe. Now let's go to Madrid, where correspondent Markus Böhnisch is standing by for us. Markus, it seems like they're taking this lockdown very seriously. Tell me about the timing. Why did authorities decide to impose these restrictions now?
Well, maybe they were already too late. Maybe they were already too late because we have an exponential development with the figures in Spain, and therefore they had to act because we have 2,000 more infections from one day to the other. And on Saturday, the Prime Minister already announced that he was expecting infections by 10,000 during this week. And it could be that we will come to this figure already today. We will have the latest figures by noon, and then we will see how this exponential development is continuing. It is sure that they had to do something, and experts say that it will last at least 2 weeks to see if these measures will be effective.
And all these drastic measures and this crisis, of course, comes where Spain just about emerged from a very severe economic crisis, and more than half of all jobs in Spain are with small and medium-sized companies, now very much affected. How worried are Spaniards about the economic impact of those measures?
It is a catastrophe without any doubt, because tourism, the most relevant services sector, is destroyed right now. It is on hold. I tried to film last night in hotels. I had an appointment there, and the hotel was already closed. So hotels, one after the other, are closing down. Flights are cancelled, and even the internal traffic in Spain is stopped, or almost stopped. So, and we have companies, bigger companies like Volkswagen, who decided to close their production plant here in Spain, and others will follow. So tomorrow is the crucial day where the government will decide how to react on this situation, how to, rescue the economy.
All right, Markus Böhnisch there reporting from Madrid. Thank you so much. So European governments try to stop the spread of coronavirus as much as they can. I'm joined by our science correspondent, Derek Williams, who is currently in self-isolation. Good to see you, Derek. From a scientific point of view, checks at the borders, partial closures of borders, do these measures help curb the spread of coronavirus?
Well, to be perfectly honest, we don't really know. This is all unprecedented. You know, science is about working on precedents, and we have absolutely no experience with this kind of a situation. So it's all uncharted territory. That said, it seems that a lot of epidemiologists in the run-up to this morning were saying closing borders will help slow the spread of the virus, but not probably dramatically. Once it's endemic within a population, then the only thing that seems to work in terms of containment is going into lockdown, as we saw in China. China didn't shut its borders. It went into lockdown within the country itself, and that helped to limit the spread of the virus within the population. Lockdowns like we're seeing similar lockdowns in Spain and Italy now. That said, as well, it's going to take a couple of weeks before you see any kind of impact because this virus has an incubation period. And so people were spreading it up until the moment of lockdown within Italy, and it will take at least 2 weeks to see any kind of impact in the numbers. And hopefully at that point, after 2 weeks, they'll start to go down, but it gets worse before it gets better.
Okay, this is all very unnerving also, especially because online we're bombarded with information about what to do in the current crisis. Now, the latest news that caused a stir was about the effects that taking ibuprofen might have on those that have the virus. What was all that about?
Well, it was interesting in German, there was a WhatsApp message that was sent out yesterday that made big waves. I got it myself from a science journalist colleague of mine, and a woman saying that at the university clinic in Vienna, they had discovered that taking ibuprofen worsens the course of the disease. The university clinic immediately came out and said, no, that's fake news. We didn't conduct any studies in that direction. That's not true. But things were complicated by the fact that then the French health minister came out and said, actually, that there was a connection with ibuprofen. He himself is a doctor. Now, virologists have now gone on record saying there is no scientific proof that ibuprofen, which also interacts with some of the receptors that are active with the coronavirus, apparently. There is, however, no scientific proof that there is a connection between those two things. It's just a hypothesis.
Okay, more confusion there probably. Derek Williams in self-isolation. Thank you so much. And here's a look now at more of the latest coronavirus developments. China has started putting all international arrivals to the country's capital, Beijing, in quarantine. It reported a total of 16 new cases on Monday. 12 of those were people arriving from abroad. Iran has reported 130 new deaths from coronavirus. That takes the death toll there to more than 720. Venezuela has ordered residents to stay at home under quarantine in 7 of its states, including the capital, Caracas. Peru has declared a state of emergency and ordered security forces to help impose self-quarantine of the population. It has also closed its borders. And the death toll from the coronavirus in the United States has risen to over 60, with 3,000 confirmed cases of the illness. The Federal Reserve has again dropped interest rates in a bid to boost the coronavirus-hit economy. And more states are ordering the closure of bars and movie theatres.
Go home, shout these New Yorkers to passers-by. Others using their balconies to preach to people to stay indoors. Even retail stores like Apple turning people away, a sign of just how seriously corporate America is taking the coronavirus. The economic costs of this pandemic, though, are hurting, especially after last week's financial meltdown. In a surprise move, the US Federal Reserve has slashed interest rates to almost zero and pledged hundreds of billions of dollars to help shore up the US economy. A decision welcomed by a president desperate for better headlines.
That's really good news. It's really great for our country. It's something that we're very happy. I have to say this, I'm very happy.
Trump also found himself pleading to Americans to stop hoarding.
You don't have to buy so much. Take it easy. Just relax. People are going in and they're buying more. I remember, I guess during the conversation, Doug of Walmart said that they're buying more than they buy at Christmas. Relax. We're doing great. It all will pass.
But for citizens like Carol Schrader, it doesn't feel that way. She's one of thousands who's been caught up in the chaos of trying to get back to the States ahead of Trump's travel ban.
No consistency in questioning, no temperature check, no swabs, nothing. We were given a 5-page document on coronavirus.
While many Americans are now living in lockdown, others are trying to carry on as if nothing has changed. But with a state of emergency declared across the country, no one will be able to ignore the coronavirus for long.
And for more, let's go to our correspondent Oliver Saleh in Washington. Oliver, Trump is urging the public to relax. But a top U.S. health official has told Americans to prepare to hunker down. Is there mixed messaging here?
Yeah, what was really astonishing here is that turnaround that we've seen here coming from the White House. You know, President Trump has really tried to downplay this crisis here. He's been talking about the coronavirus, comparing it to a flu. And then just a very few days later, he declared a nationwide state of emergency. And Anthony Fauci, that you just quoted, America's top expert, if you will, in infectious diseases, he said that the worst is yet to come. So we do get these mixed messages. And we also see a president who seems really little informed about the details of the coronavirus and the impact it has. And he has also been lying to the public about the number of tests that were done in the United States. And he's also been trying to distract from this crisis, by comparing and especially blaming his predecessor, Barack Obama, about how his administration dealt with the swine flu. So a lot of this we've experienced here is the usual Donald Trump, if you will. But what's crucial right now is that he's not able to calm the American public down and really stirring up even more confusion here among the public. So for Trump, this is a very damaging scenario and a very damaging reality that he finds himself in with this global pandemic happening that is also affecting the United States, of course, every day more so. And that all of that and the economic fallout stemming from this is putting up a considerable strain on his re-election campaign.
Yeah, this is why probably he was very pleased about the U.S. Federal Reserve taking drastic action, action that we haven't seen since the height of the financial crisis in 2008. What's the aim there?
Yeah, and that's just like you say, that's also why it's such a dramatic step, because the last time that happened was right after the Lehman crash of 2008 that led to the worldwide financial crisis. And it's a very significant step also because this is considered when a central bank cuts their interest rates to zero as a last resort to boost the economy. And you mentioned it, Trump has been calling for this step for a long time because obviously a booming economy would help him to get re-elected. The Fed has always rejected that, but now they also believe it's necessary. It's sort of like admitting that the U.S. is getting close to a recession and that this really needs to happen right now to help the economy, but we're not talking about a booming economy anymore. This is rather about avoiding the worst looming bankruptcies and mass unemployment.
Now, the coronavirus also played a key role in the latest Democratic debate. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, there was no audience because of the coronavirus. So the debate was supposed to be held in Phoenix, Arizona, where there are going to be primary elections next week. And it was then moved to Washington, D.C., held without any audience at all. But of course, the coronavirus was also a very important aspect of the debate. And both had some unity here by arguing that President Trump does not have the situation under control.
All right, Oliver Sully there reporting from Washington. Thank you so much. And let's get you up to speed now on some other stories making headlines around the world. Spain's King Felipe has stripped his father, former monarch Juan Carlos, of his annual allowances from the royal household. The move follows alleged financial irregularities involving the former king. The current monarch has also renounced any personal inheritance he could receive from his father. German tourism giant TUI has announced it was suspending the bulk of its operations due to the coronavirus outbreak. The company employs 70,000 worldwide. TUI confirmed the measures would affect its package travel, cruise and hotel businesses. Did US President Donald Trump try to buy up a German company leading the race for a coronavirus vaccine? Berlin has reacted angrily to reports that Trump offered biopharma company CureVac $1 billion to develop a vaccine exclusively for the United States. Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said that Berlin could not allow others exclusive rights to German research. Economy Minister Peter Altmaier was blunter. Germany, he said, is not for sale.
Searching for a breakthrough, this CureVac lab in southwest Germany hopes to be the first in the race to develop a vaccine against the coronavirus. And is being noticed, with reports surfacing Donald Trump is trying to lure the company to the US. Berlin is encouraging the biopharmaceutical firm to stay.
We are seeing a lot of political support, and the issue is taken very seriously from various sides. Specifically, we have received support from an international vaccine initiative, so that these clinical trials can also quickly begin here.
The company says research into several possible vaccines has begun, with the two most promising to be chosen for clinical tests. It expects to have an experimental vaccine developed by June or July, and will then seek approval for testing on humans. CureVac specialises in a method called RNA, which makes human cells produce proteins that trigger immune responses against infections or cancers.
And on this basis, we are now building that new vaccine. We now have a platform process where we can quickly respond to new threats. So we believe that this RNA technology is a very good way to quickly provide solutions.
If the vaccine is successful in human trials, CureVac says up to 10 million doses could be produced in several weeks. Experts originally thought a vaccine would be 18 months away, meaning a successful human trial as early as July would be welcomed by the global community.
The Bank of Japan has unveiled a series of emergency monetary policy measures to shore up the world's third largest economy amid the coronavirus pandemic. The news, however, doesn't seem to be calming investors. Tokyo's Nikkei fell after early gains and Australia's index tumbled nearly 10%, its biggest loss ever. Markets in Hong Kong and Shanghai were also trading lower. That after Chinese authorities released data showing just how much damage the coronavirus has done to the world's second largest economy. Retail sales have dropped 20.5% and industrial output fell by 13.5%. And for more, I'm joined by Mida Samant, the investment director at Fidelity Investment, joining me in Hong Kong. Good to have you with us, Mida. The latest numbers from China didn't really come in as a surprise, yet markets drop. How low can this go?
Well, if you look at what's happening with the markets, really, it's really sentiment that's having an impact. And this sentiment impact is because of two sort of black swan events, because of, say, the coronavirus, as well as the fall in the oil price. And that's exactly what's having on investor minds.
Right.
So what we really need to see is that where is this medical issue going to go? Yes, central banks are providing some kind of balm or cure to the markets, but it's not really a cure, it's a balm.
Right. But I mean, central banks, for investors...
And that's where we don't know...
Just let me ask you, investors, they look for some sense of security, and central banks have stepped in. Why isn't that enough for investors to somehow help stabilize the market?
Well, at the end of the day, when you look at what's happening with respect to economic data, what we are seeing is a contraction in demand as well as activity. And until we see that people are comfortable enough to step out of their houses and then come in and fuel this demand, we don't think we are likely to see markets recover from a sentiment perspective.
Okay, so we need a sense of normality again. We need a sense of normality, I get from you, Mita Samad of Fidelity Investment in Hong Kong. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, European markets also started trading, and my colleague Chelsea Delaney keeps an eye on the trading floor in Frankfurt. Chelsea, how are investors there holding up?
Well, it has been a harrowing past week for investors, and it's not looking any better here at the start of trading here in Frankfurt. The DAX just opened, and it's down already about 7%, just really a dramatic fall. And we've seen a lot of news over the weekend of increasing restrictions on businesses, on trade, on travel. That's all going to have a significant impact. But the measures that central banks and governments are putting in place to really help prop up the economy just aren't convincing investors. The Fed, the Bank of Japan, all are coming out with a lot of easing measures, cuts to interest rates, and governments also here in Germany, for example, they've unveiled unlimited credit for businesses, but investors just aren't sure if that's going to be enough to offset the economic impact.
All right, Chelsea Delaney in Frankfurt, thank you so much. Now, South Korea has been among the countries worst affected by the new coronavirus, but South Korean businesses are working together to share the economic burden from COVID-19.
South Korean landlords and tenants are sharing the burden of weathering the decline in business caused by the coronavirus outbreak, with reductions in rents. Large traditional markets especially needed the help.
We used to get an average 300,000 visitors a day. But since the coronavirus outbreak began, we've been seeing less than 1/10 of our usual number of customers. Business owners here have been suffering immensely.
Not only domestic sales are affected, as international trade has also dwindled, especially for small exporters.
Korea has a competitive global edge in the fashion industry, and its products are high in demand overseas. But now that foreign buyers can't even enter Korea, coupled with slowing fabric shipments and fewer visitors to the market overall, it's having quite a large ripple effect.
In addition to the rent reductions, market managers have also coordinated strict public health responses. Some landlords have provided up to 50% off in rent, although smaller reductions are more common. But even those providing the discounts argue for more state-led measures.
Plummeting revenues are the merchants' biggest concern, so tax remedies are needed. Although the government has announced new tax breaks, a lower income tax means little if merchants aren't making much to begin with, so many want to see a decrease in value-added taxes.
The large traditional markets rely on both tourism and elder shoppers, both of which have dried up, although more assistance may be coming. Merchants here in Seoul's Namdaemun market and around South Korea are soon likely to get some more help from the federal government. The National Assembly is set to pass a multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget to support small businesses and to help contain and mitigate the COVID-19 outbreak. The so-called nice landlord trend has also brought banks into the movement with low-interest loans as South Korea copes with a deepening COVID-19 crisis.
And how are people coping with the prospect of having to spend time in isolation? Well, people in Italy, they've been trying to keep up morale by singing with their neighbours from the safety of their balconies. One tenor in Florence has been serenading his street for the last few days. We'll leave you now with some of his music. As always, thanks for joining us.
È sempre misero, io lei sono